Before we get started, I want to teach you the only Hebrew phrase I know, but it's one that will ingratiate you to the locals if you go over there. Can you say broken toe? Broken toe. So you slide over the R in broken and say broken tov, and you've said good morning. So boker toe. Boker toe. Okay, so let's get started with the Pilgrim's Prayer that we prayed every morning on our 2022 trip.
Lord Jesus, your feet made this land holy. You came as a pilgrim to this city of peace. As we follow your footsteps, open our eyes that we may see. May we see you not only in the stones, but in your people and each other. Write your gospel in our hearts. Help us to proclaim it with our lives. Lord, each day as we follow you to the heavenly Jerusalem, teach us to pray as you taught those who first followed you. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
On our first trip in 2020, we arrived late at night and stayed overnight in Tel Aviv, in a hotel overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. And the next morning, we drove up north to the coast, about 35 miles, to Caesarea Maritima, one of Herod the Great's most impressive accomplishments. He built the first artificial harbor in the ancient world with a new invention, hydraulic concrete. He built it between 21 BC and 10 BC and named the city after Caesar Augustus. Caesarea Maritima is significant in the Bible for several reasons. As I mentioned, it was the first artificial harbor in the ancient world, and it opened the shipping trade about 10 years before Christ was born. Herod's grandson, Herod Agrippa, is mentioned in Acts as dying a really agonizing death. Herod the Great built the palace on the promontory. And so this is a map from Caesarea Maritima, and it's a national park, and the palace was built on this promontory here. You enter here where the amphitheater is, and you'll see pictures of the amphitheater and of the harbor. Harbor is here. The Crusaders built a whole complex in that area. You're looking at the pictures now of the complex at Caesarea Maritima. In addition to the harbor, there are the other remains of the town, including the palace, the amphitheater, the hippodrome, ruins of the city, and an aqueduct system. Pilate's base was in Caesarea Maritima. He and other governors lived in that palace. And it was also in Caesarea Maritima where Peter converted Cornelius and his household. And it was in Caesarea Maritima where Paul was held in the palace, then occupied by Felix to keep him safe. At the end of his third missionary journey, Paul traveled to Jerusalem and took 4 Jewish converts with him. That's in Acts 21. To the temple. The Jews assumed that he had brought Gentiles into the temple where they were not allowed, and causing a riot. So The Roman troops arrested Paul, saving him from certain death, and escorted him out of the city when one of his relatives discovered a murder plot against him. Paul was taken to Caesarea Maritima, which is roughly 60 miles from Jerusalem. And he was held there for 2 years. It was there that the Roman governor Felix heard his case based on the allegations of the temple Jews. There are remains of the rooms under the peristyle garden on the palace grounds where some believe that Paul was given rooms, and that's where he stayed for 2 years.
The harbor city created much wealth for Herod because it opened up the shipping trade. Herod built a luxurious palace, including a swimming pool that extended to the ocean. Herod the Great's grandson, Herod Agrippa, was the king of Judea from 41 to 44 AD, according to Josephus. And in 44 AD, he was in Caesarea presiding over festivities there in honor of Caesar, when he fell violently ill with a severe stomach pain. He was carried into the palace where he was in agony before dying 5 days later at 54 years of age. He was eaten by worms. I'm sorry, that's in there. He was eaten by worms, which is confirmed in Acts chapter 12. Cornelius was the first Gentile converted to the new faith. After Peter converted Cornelius and his household, Peter had some explaining to do later in Jerusalem, leading to the conclusion that the gospel was meant for the Gentiles as well as for the Jews. In 1961, the Pilate stone was found in Caesarea, so called because it is a first-century inscription mentioning Pontius Pilate. Scholars believe that Pilate's base was in Caesarea Maritima, which had replaced Jerusalem as the administrative capital and military headquarters in AD 60. It is the only surviving record of Pilate, who is not only referenced by the Jewish historian Josephus, but also by Roman historians, including Tacitus. The original is in the Israel Museum. A copy is at Caesarea Maritima.
This photo, by the way, was taken from the Arbel Cliffs overlooking the Sea of Galilee. You can see the Sea of Galilee in that photo. So many momentous events took place in Jesus' life, took place around the Sea of Galilee, including the calling of the several disciples. Josephus estimates that there were 240 towns and villages around the Sea of Galilee in Jesus' time. And that's where Jesus' ministry, of course, was based. And scholars think that Jesus probably visited just about every one of those towns and villages. The region is also significant because that's where Isaiah foretold that the Messiah would come from the region of Galilee in Isaiah 9. The Sea of Galilee was an important commercial area surrounded by Capernaum, Bethsaida, Magdala, and other towns that supported a thriving fishing industry and a health resort in the sulfur springs of Tiberias. Many miracles occurred around the Sea of Galilee, including the feeding of the 4,000 in Matthew, the feeding of the 5,000, Luke 9, Jesus calming the storm, and Jesus walking on water. Cana, where Jesus performed his first miracle, was located in Galilee, just north of Nazareth.
The Sea of Galilee is a large freshwater lake located in the Jordan Valley, about 60 miles north of Jerusalem. Approximately 13 miles long and 7.5 miles wide at its broadest point near Magdala, the sea resembles the shape of a harp. The Sea of Galilee is fed with fresh water from snow-topped Mount Hermon and Mount Lebanon. The Jordan River continues out the south end of the Sea of Galilee, flowing downhill until it ends at the Dead Sea. Some scholars think that the Old Testament name, Sea of Chinneroth, comes from a Hebrew word meaning harp. After John baptized Jesus, he was driven into the wilderness. The heavens were torn open, according to the Gospel of Mark, and the Holy Spirit came into Jesus. After his time in the desert, he received his mission to come to Galilee to preach. Galilee is at the crossroads of international trade routes that go by Capernaum. The Via Maris, the Roman road, and the King's Highway was an ideal place for Jesus to be, is in the middle of where the action is. Jesus spent 3 years teaching, preaching, and healing throughout Galilee.
The Mount of Beatitudes is just above Capernaum at about 11 o'clock on the Sea of Galilee. As you walk up the hill toward the church, when you're let out of the bus in the parking lot at the Mount of Beatitudes, you walk up a hill, and on the left there is there's a hill, and there's actually a banana farm there right now, and the public is not allowed into that area now. But when Bill first started these teaching tours of Israel, the fence wasn't there. You'll see Isaac, our guide, standing by the fence when we come to that picture. And when Bill first started doing these, the fence wasn't there, and you could actually walk down to the amphitheater, natural amphitheater, where Jesus taught. And you'll see that when you see the slide of Isaac standing by a fence, you'll know that that's the most significant thing about the Mount of Beatitudes. That's where Jesus taught. So Jesus would have stood at the base of the hill and walked and spoke up to his audience on the hillside. A person speaking in a normal voice can be heard at that spot. A sound engineer has tested the acoustics of the area, and they say that it's the same acoustics as in the Disney Center in LA.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it? Back in those days. The great acoustics are created by the breeze coming off the Mediterranean over the Arbel Pass and carries sound up into that amphitheater, serving as a natural amplifier. The Mount of Beatitudes is, of course, the site of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. The church now is run by Italian nuns.
This is just the sign entering as you enter the Mount of Beatitudes. This is the place to the left there of that fence where Jesus taught. That's the banana field with the white covering. This is a map. This is a photograph that he showed us with Jesus standing at the bottom of the hill. The Church of the Mount of Beatitudes is located at the top of the hill, and you can see in some of these pictures it overlooks the Sea of Galilee. Beautiful grounds. That's Tiberias on the other side of Galilee. That was taken from the parking lot at the Mount of Beatitudes. Beautifully kept up grounds at the Mount of Beatitudes. This is Bill teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. And this is one of the buildings there, probably where the Italian nuns live. And that's one of the Italian nuns. He was about 4'1". This is the inside of the Church of Beatitudes. Another shot inside the church. The grounds overlooking the Sea of Galilee. A lot of good photo ops from those grounds, looking onto the Sea of Galilee. From there, we went on to Capernaum. And Capernaum was the center of Jesus' Galilean ministry, as you know, for 3 years, when he lived with Peter after Peter's marriage. It's within about an hour's walk from the Mount of Beatitudes, the Mount of Beatitudes being higher, Capernaum being on the lake. Jesus attended the synagogue just a few feet from Peter's house. You could literally throw a stone to Peter's house. It's from about where I'm standing to the narthex. It's really close. Matthew, of course, the tax collector turned disciple and apostle, was from Capernaum. And it was in Capernaum where Jesus healed the centurion's servant in Luke 7.
And it was in Capernaum where Jesus healed the paralytic who was lowered by friends through the roof to reach Jesus, from Mark 2 and Luke 5. The ruins of the synagogue are what remains of a synagogue built over the original one. You will see the photos of the church with partial glass floor that was built over the ruins of Peter's house so that you can look through the church to see Peter's house.
This is the gate as you enter the city of Capernaum and some of the ruins of the city. This is the synagogue. That's the stone's throw, and that's another photo of the synagogue where Jesus taught across the street from Peter's house. These are the ruins of Peter's house underneath the church that's built over it. And this is the glass floor looking into the church from above, looking into the Peter's house from above. And this is the inside of the Church of St. Peter's. Again, these are more ruins of in the area and the buildings were decorated by these beautiful pieces of artwork in stone that still survive to this day. That's again underneath the church, St. Peter's house. We moved on then to Bethsaida. Bethsaida was the hometown of Peter before he got married, Andrew, James, and John. Bethsaida means house of fishermen, and it was there where Jesus told Peter and Andrew, "I will make you fishers of men." That was in Matthew 4. It was also the place where Jesus fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves of bread and a few small fish, as reported in Matthew 15 and Mark 8.
Bethsaida was a deep water port. Now it is a distance from the Sea of Galilee because part of the sea was filled with silt. Capernaum is at 11 o'clock on the Sea of Galilee, so way up at the top left. Bethsaida is 12 o'clock. Jesus knew the people he called to come with him. James and John were Jesus' cousins. According to some traditions, Salome was the sister of Mary, Jesus' mother, making Salome Jesus' aunt, and her sons, John the Apostle and James, Jesus' cousins. Jesus didn't just ask strangers to follow him one day. He knew these people.
So this is a park also, and this is the sign entering the park. And you go into the park, and there's a trail that you take out to a clearing where they've made a little shelter where you can stand. This is walking that trail down toward the sea. Again, the Bethsaida is no longer right on the lake. It is somewhat back from the lake, probably maybe I would say half a mile, quarter of a mile, half a mile back from the lake because of the silt that's built up. This is the place where we stopped and talked. Magdala was the hometown of Mary Magdalene, who Jesus delivered from a demonized life in Mark 16. Thereafter, of course, she became a dedicated disciple. She was a woman of means who followed Jesus all the way to the cross, John tells us. And 3 days later, after the crucifixion, was the first witness to the resurrection of our Lord. And that's in John 20. Jesus may have actually taught in Magdala in the first century synagogue that was excavated here that you'll see photos of. It's very possible that he taught there because he did go there once.
Magdala was a fishing town. They exported wine and preserved fish. The name of the village in Jesus' day was called Migdal. The table that you will see in the photos is a Torah reading table from a first century synagogue. A menorah is carved into the stone, a rosetta, a pomegranate, as well as other designs. The one at Magdala is a replica of the original. The first century synagogue that you will see in the photos has the original mosaic floor. The stone benches for seating are around the perimeter of the synagogue. The Torah table was located in the center. This is where the reader was located. The synagogue at Magdala is only one of 2 first-century synagogues in the country. There are several fourth-century synagogues. It's amazing that they can keep these, or that they can last the test of time over not just decades, but hundreds of years. The grounds at Magdala include a fish area where fish were kept in pools, which you'll see on a slide momentarily. Another part of the grounds are the ruins where the houses were, with a population at that time of about 20,000 people.
You'll see Father Kelly also in one of the photos, or one or two of the photos, and he gave us a tour of the church and grounds. His sister who was just a great gal, is also a nun, gave us the tour in 2020. They're both from Ireland, and they're just great people. You'll see the outdoor mosaic showing the Roman Decapolis towns. All were pagan, all but Bethshan are in Jordan. You'll also see photos of various chapels inside the church at Magdala with mosaics depicting Bible scenes. You'll see a mosaic of Jesus healing Jairus' daughter in Mark 5. Father Kelly held a mass for us in the chapel underneath the church called the Encounter Chapel. The floor of this chapel, take a look at when you see the photos of this chapel underground. The floor of this chapel is a Roman street from the 1st century. And the painting behind the altar depicts the woman seeking to be healed by touching the bottom of Jesus' robe. It's an incredible piece of art. So the chapel is dedicated to Jesus' encounter with all of us. He did a homily his homily was about marriage and included a renewal of the marriage vows for all of the married folks present, which was quite a treat. This is that Torah reading table. This is the replica of the Torah reading table. And you'll see a close-up of some of the designs on the side of there you go, the menorah and some of the other designs. It's just an incredible piece that survived all these centuries. These shots are of the synagogue. This is kind of a far shot. You'll see some close-ups. This is the synagogue. The 1st century synagogue that they excavated when they started building at Magdala. These are the fish pools outside, and this is the map, the mosaic map of the Decapolis cities. The Sea of Galilee being there, that big blue body in the middle. Father Kelly there being in the center, Bill being on the left, and Isaac on the right. This is the statues of Jesus touching, reaching out to Mary Magdalene. This is the inside of the church upstairs with the boat-shaped altar carved out of Lebanese wood. Looking out to the Sea of Galilee. This is one of the chapels, one of the 5 or 6 chapels they have in mosaics, beautiful mosaics of Bible verses. Father Kelly had a really nice teaching. This is the Encounter Chapel downstairs and the 1st century floor, Roman floor. The woman touching Jesus' robes. Father Kelly at the altar, and you can see the Roman road there. The floor. The next day, we headed up to Dan in the north.
Way up north, yeah, way at the top. The city was settled by the Israelite tribe of Dan. The city they conquered and settled in was renamed Dan. It kept its name. It was one of two places, the other was Bethel, where Jeroboam set up golden calves for the people to worship because northern tribes weren't permitted to worship in Jerusalem. Dan was often referred to as the northern border of Israel during Old Testament history, according to 2 Samuel 3. As the Israelites became attracted to fertility cults, Dan became a center of Baal worship in the region.
There are 3 springs that feed into the Jordan River, and they all emanate from this place in northern Israel, Syria, that area. The Senir, S-E-N-I-R, is one of the 3 natural springs in the north that make up the Jordan River. Dan, where we're talking about now, is the second, and the third is Banias, where Caesarea Philippi is located, and we'll get to that in a minute. You'll see photos in the fortified town of Dan, and look closely at those photos because those walls are what the fortified city of Jericho looked like. So the walls that you'll be seeing, these black basalt kind of walls, are the original 3,000-year-old walls, very thick like the walls of Jericho. So we journeyed from Dan, after Dan, up to the Golan Heights, crossing a little white bridge, which used to be the border between Israel and Syria. According to Isaac, our guide, the Syrians shelled the Israelis every day, which triggering the Six-Day War in 1967. So Israel got the border moved back 15 miles. So we were on the slopes of the northern end of the Golan. These are the pictures of the spring at Dan. The ancient trail there that leads out to the place where, to some ruins, where Bill gave us some background, some biblical background on this area. So these are the walls I was talking about, those 3,000-year-old walls, like the ones that were in Jericho. Those are the walls. Some artwork on the side of one of the walls. Heading now to a place where we Bill did some Bible teaching. Part of the ruins at Dan, the city there. This is where, among the ruins where we sat in Bible, and Bill gave us some Bible lessons.
Jesus visited Caesarea Philippi, way up north. Matthew 16 talks about when Jesus traveled with his disciples from Capernaum to the Mount of Beatitudes, and then up to Tyre and Sidon on the east of Caesarea Philippi. Jesus asked his disciples there at Caesarea Philippi, "Who do people say that I am?" "Some say John the Baptist," Peter said. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of John. On this rock, Peter, I will build my church. In my opinion, this is one of the more profound places in the Bible at all, where Jesus is validating him, and because he has the right faith, if you will. He knows who Jesus is. I think that's an amazing statement in there.
From Caesarea Philippi, Jesus and his disciples left to go to the Mount of Transfiguration, which Bill thinks is Mount Hermon, which is directly north of Caesarea Philippi. It was there where Jesus' divinity was confirmed by Moses and Elijah. As the crow flies, Mount Hermon is about 5 miles north of Caesarea Philippi. The area had been known as the site where the Roman god Pan was worshipped, and there are ancient ruins at Caesarea Philippi. The Banias spring provided the water, and there is a temple to Pan that's built next to a cave on the mountainside, and you'll see that in one of the photos. And then after we left the springs to go to lunch at a nearby restaurant, you'll see a picture of a peacock. The peacocks walked around the grounds of the restaurant. The trout we had for lunch was farmed, but they are native to the Jordan River, and we each had a big plate. You'll see a picture of this plate with each of us had a big trout about this big with potatoes and other vegetables and things. So it was quite the experience. Generally speaking, when Bill goes up there with his group, you sit outside under these beautiful trees, and they set a beautiful table outside. The day we were there, it was, little showers, little rain occasionally, so we sat inside, but we still looked out to the beautiful grounds around the restaurant. These are the Banias Springs, so beautiful. That's the mountainside where the Temple of Pan was built. And that's another picture of the springs. Again, this is one of the 3 springs that feed into the Jordan River that goes all the way through the Sea of Galilee. There's one of the peacocks down to the Dead Sea. There's a trout.
We're headed back to the Sea of Galilee, which goes by many different names, including Lake Tiberias, Sea of Chinnereth, and Lake of Gennesaret. We visited the boat museum and saw the first century boat discovered in 1986. Afterwards, we took a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, which was absolutely magic. You're there where Jesus was. That was my feeling on that trip. It was dusk as we came back across the sea, and we had a good view of the area around the lake and the Arbel Cliffs and Pass, which are on the other side of the lake from where we got in the actual boat. The murder of John affected Jesus deeply. He took the boat across the Sea of Galilee toward the Golan Heights. That's from about 11 o'clock. If you're looking at the Sea of Galilee, it's about 11 o'clock to about 1 o'clock on the sea, if you will. The people followed him on foot and met him there. He had pity on them, and he taught and healed them.
The Arbel is usually calm in the morning, but the afternoon breeze from the Mediterranean comes down through the Arbel Pass to cross the Sea of Galilee to the Golan Heights. We experienced that breeze the next day when we were caught in an ice storm hiking down from the Arbel Cliffs. So it was a little bit more than a breeze, but we definitely got the flavor of it. This is the outside of the boat museum where they found that first century boat. They used foam to take it out of the sea and so that it wouldn't be damaged. This is that first century boat that they found in 1986. And this is the boat that we were getting on. There's only one Christian boat. They sing the Star Spangled Banner as you get on, but there's only one Christian boat in that area. And this is Danny's boat. He also sings some Christian songs, and Bill gives a little homily. On the boat looking across the sea, the lake. That's Mount Arbel in the distance there on the left. You'll see the cliff on the left. Again, another shot of the Arbel cliffs on the very high cliff on the left. That's me wading into the Sea of Galilee. Father Kelly had said the day before, I don't know why you'd come all this distance and not want to go into the Sea of Galilee. So it was cold. I rolled up my pants and went into the Sea of Galilee. This is Knopf Guinness, our hotel.
This was the location of the Six-Day War, southern part of the Golan Heights. Luke tells us that they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes across the lake from Galilee on the Golan Heights side and found a man possessed by demons. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and so they went into the pigs, who jumped into the lake and drowned. This man had been living with a legion of demons, 6,000 demons. After Jesus healed him, the man got cleaned up and dressed and was fine. Jesus wouldn't let him go with him, however. He told him to return to his people and tell others how much God had done for him. It's pretty much the same as we're asking of all of us today, isn't it? Go and tell.
The Golan Heights is a flat plateau about 50 miles long. So the day before, we were on the northern end up near Dan and Caesarea Philippi. And when you get down to the Sea of Galilee, you're on the southern end of the Golan Heights. Isaac told us that the Six-Day War in 1967 was brief, but a bloody conflict fought in June of that year between Israel and the Arab states of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. He said that before that short war, the Syrians were shooting at the Israeli fishermen and other civilians on the lake, but they were driven back during the 1967 war. So that's where that occurred, and you'll see that there's a marker there, and that's where that's the region of the Gerasenes. This is the marker at the lookout. That's the hill where the demons went into the pigs.
Yardenit is at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan starts in the north at the Syrian-Lebanese border, flows into the Sea of Galilee on the north part of the sea, and continues at the southern tip of the sea where the Jordan eventually empties into the Dead Sea.
So this actually may be the place where some of you went to the Jordan River, because the actual site where John was baptizing was not open until just a few years ago. Due to military activity and excavations in the area of the West Bank near Jericho, where John the Baptist was baptizing, tourists weren't permitted in that area. So the Israeli Ministry of Tourism established the Yardenit in 1981 as an alternative pilgrimage site. And Jesus, you'll see, was baptized in the Jordan near Jericho, where we also visited later in the trip. This is right at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee, where the Jordan flows out from the Sea of Galilee. We headed north back up on the other side of the Sea of Galilee to Tabqa on the western edge of the Sea of Galilee at about 10 o'clock on the lake. It's right under the Mount of Beatitudes in Capernaum. And we visited the Church of the Multiplication of Loaves and Fishes in Tabqa. That's where Jesus fed the 5,000 men plus women and children with 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's a Benedictine monastery now, and you'll see the ancient olive press in one of the photos. The olives go in the middle of the press, and the first press that they do is the oil is used for eating and cooking. Then they do another press, and that second press is used for soap and oil to light homes and so on.
Built in 1972 on top of 5th century church, they didn't build right away on the site because the Romans were persecuting Christians. So they passed on the knowledge for 300 years until Constantine came into power in 313 AD. Constantine decreed that Christians would no longer be persecuted. In 325 AD, Constantine called the Council of Nicaea in the modern-day Turkey, which produced the Nicene Creed. It resolved some conflicts within the church about core doctrine. The oral tradition began here and continued for 300 years until it was put in writing as the Nicene Creed.
This is the outside of the church. There's a big patio kind of plaza outside of the church. This is the olive press. It's filled with water there because it was raining. This is the inside of the church. Again, this is a newer church. It's built in 1972 on the site of where Jesus fed the 5,000. Our guides had intended us to go up to the Arbel in the morning because generally the Arbel is calmer in the morning. But it was raining up there. It was really storming. It was really inclement weather. And so we couldn't go up. So we did this trip around the Sea of Galilee that we've just taken you on. They looked up at the cliff and said, I think we can go now. And so the road up to the cliff ends about a mile from the peak at the Arbel National Park. And that's where we parked. About 12 or 15 of us hiked about a mile to the peak. The cliff face of the Mount Arbel rises 1,300 feet above the Sea of Galilee and offers a spectacular view of the Golan Heights, the Sea of Galilee, and Mount Hermon.
I personally was taken by how high that mountain was, because from the distance, you're looking across the lake, it's like, okay. But then when you hear how many feet above the water it is, it's like, oh, that's a whole different story. I'm going to take us now to Tiberias, which is basically on the, right about here on the Sea of Galilee. We had lunch in Tiberias and later returned for Mass at St. Peter's. Tiberias is an ancient city. It was built in 7 AD by the Romans during Jesus' lifetime. The Romans built this town because of the hot spring baths. It was named after Roman Emperor Tiberius. It's the biggest town in the shores of the Sea of Galilee.
That's a photograph of the Arbel Cliffs that I just took a picture of a picture that was up there at the park. This is at the top of the Arbel Cliff looking out on the surrounding valleys. We had a teaching up there on the top of the Arbel. Basically about wars that occurred in that area. This is the top of the Arbel, another view looking toward the Sea of Galilee. So we had a slight clearing of weather, and then we had the teaching up there, and then on the way back, really terrible ice storm. But it was exciting. This is lunch in Tiberias.
That's lunch?
Bob and I needed a beer after that hike. This is the Church of St. Peter in Tiberias, where we went to Mass. It's the inside of the church. Beautiful mosaics on the walls. We're going to head up to Nazareth now, to the Church of the Annunciation. Okay. The Annunciation marked the event in Nazareth where the teenage Mary was told that she would be the mother of the Messiah. One tradition says that it occurred where the church was established. Another tradition holds that it took place while she was drawing water. So there is a photo of Mary's well in this section also, as well as photos of the Church of the Annunciation. The bronze door that you'll see of the church depicts various events in Jesus' life. The church was built above the place where Mary is said to have lived. This is the outside of the church. That's the bronze doors depicting the life of Jesus. This is one of the corridors outside leading into the church, artwork from various nations. This is the inside. There's a little chapel down where all those people are congregated on the left, where Mary is believed to have lived. Another shot of the chapel. Underneath the church where Mary is believed to have lived. Some of the ruins from Nazareth. This is the upper church on top of the ruins where Mary is believed to have lived. Some of the ruins in that area. Nazareth, outside of the church. Statue of Mary on the grounds of the Church of the Annunciation.
The brow of the cliff is referenced in Luke 4. After reading the messianic scriptures in Isaiah 61, Jesus rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way.
This photograph is one on our way up to the brow of the cliff. It's overlooking the city of Nazareth. That's Mary's well, the alternate side of the Annunciation. They call it the Mount of Precipice. This is looking over the brow of the hill, where they tried to throw Jesus over and build a teaching up there at the brow of the hill. Bet-Shan was an incredible Roman metropolis 2,000 years ago. It was one of the 10 Decapolis cities, the only one west of the Jordan. In Jesus' day, pilgrims stopped at Bet-Shan on their way from Galilee to Jerusalem for the 3 festivals, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. It was a place where the valleys meet, an important junction with the Via Maris. It was a very wealthy city with a temple, a hippodrome, bathhouses, a theater, and other evidences of wealth. You'll see it's an incredible town. In Old Testament times, it was known as the place where the bodies of King Saul and 3 of his sons were hung by the Philistines after the Battle of Gilboa.
In 63 BC, Pompey made Judea a part of the Roman Empire. Bethshan was refounded and rebuilt by Gabinius. The town center shifted from the summit of the mound or tell to its slopes. Bethshan prospered and became the leading city of the Decapolis. The 10 cities of the Decapolis were Scythopolis, I think you gave me this one on purpose. Scythopolis,
I did.
Modern Bethshan in Israel, Hippos, Gadara, Raphana, Dion or Dium, Pella, Gerasa, also known as Jerash, Philadelphia, modern Amman, Jordan, Kanatha, and Damascus, the capital of modern Syria. Following Alexander the Great's conquest of the region, Bethshan became a Hellenistic city and was renamed Scythopolis. We left Bethshan and drove through the Jordan Valley, passing through the West Bank checkpoint. Isaac told us that at first Arafat followed the agreement and kept the peace, but the terrorists started lobbing bombs and killing people. The last straw was in 2002 when terrorists killed 100 at a Passover meal. The Israelites had intelligence who the terrorists were, and they cleared the terrorists out and built a wall.
I think most of these pictures from Bethshan were taken in our 2020 trip. That's an outdoor map of the area, what the city looked like in ancient times. That's the amphitheater. And on the left is what they call the Cardo, or the main street of Bethshan. Some more of the ruins. These mosaics were the original mosaics, thousands of years old. The Jordan River baptismal site near Jericho was only open to the public 5 years ago. So those of you who have been to Israel, went to Israel before that, may not have seen, may not have seen the Jordan River baptismal site. It's now a national park. There are several monasteries of different faiths, different Catholic-type faiths in the area. And this is the site, of course, in Jericho where Jesus was baptized. It's 900 feet below sea level. Across the Jordan River is the country of Jordan. The border is actually now in the middle of the Jordan River. So the border now between the two countries follows the Jordan River, basically from the northern to the southern. The upper Jordan is at Dan, near Dan at Mount Hermon, and Jericho is at the lower end of the Jordan. 3 really important events occurred here. Jesus was baptized here by John. We read in Joshua chapter 3 that this was the place where the Israelites crossed the river into the promised land at the end of their 40-year trip from Egypt. And also this is we learn in 2 Kings chapter 2, this is where Elijah was brought up to heaven in a whirlwind at the bank of the Jordan.
Jericho is the only natural oasis in the area. There are many springs in the area, including Elisha's spring. And of course, Joshua won the Battle of Jericho. We all know that. So it brings up a question. Anybody know how many times they walked around the city of Jericho?
Guess again.
Guess again. According to the Bible, they were to go once around, and then the next day they'd go once around for 6 days. On the 7th day, they went 7 times around. And then...
So 13 times.
I figured they could figure that out, but that's okay. The priest was holding a shofar. Shofars come in all sorts of sizes and shapes. They are basically, let me put this up here. They are basically a sheep's horn of some sort. And this one is a small one. I didn't have a huge suitcase. Some of them are like a yard long. They turn and twist and they do all sorts of things. The most challenging part about this to me is trying to figure out how to blow it. The man that I bought it from showed me how, he had one and he showed me how to blow it, and I tried it and it didn't come out quite right. So I'm giving you no promises what this is going to sound like. I've been practicing. Just keep your fingers crossed for me. Pray for me, please. See if I can make it work. It's very loud. Yeah, really. That's not the best I can do, but it is not bad. That's what it sounds like. Practice makes perfect. Anyway, it was a fun thing to have. I thought, I'm going to Israel. I'll probably never go back again. I want a token of where I just was. So this is what this is. You're welcome to come up and take a look at it when we're finished here, if you'd like.
There was a group being baptized in the Jordan when we were there. They purchased these white gowns and then they put them over their clothes, I guess, and they take them in groups. This was Bob and me with some of the Israeli soldiers who are guarding the place. We headed then on to the Judean wilderness. What we did, there's a lookout up there, and the bus took us up the hill and we stopped in the Judean wilderness after we left the Jordan River on our way to Jerusalem. So we could see Jericho from the lookout points, but this is the wilderness of the Bible. It's a Bedouin with his camel there, offering to give camel rides. And that's the wilderness area from the lookout. And our last stop on this trip, on this presentation today, is just as we enter Jerusalem. We went up to Mount Scopus overlooking Jerusalem to the Hebrew University at the top. Overlooking Jerusalem. Overlooking the old town. And you can see in the photos that you'll see that you'll see the Dome of the Rock, which of course is in the old city. And also you'll see a map and you'll see the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer in the middle. So when we went to the top, we had a little Kiddush ceremony, a Jewish benediction and prayer that's recited over a cup of wine immediately before the meal on the eve of the Sabbath or of a festival. Diane and I both bought Jerusalem crosses. I bought mine in Bethlehem, and she bought hers in Jerusalem, but they're both at the Jerusalem cross, and Diane's going to explain the symbolism of this special cross.
The crosses are different. I've gone online to look at what they are. I've got mine. Diane has hers. They're different from each other, so there's no one size fits all. There's no one design fits all. But basically, the Jerusalem cross consists of a large center cross. It's more like a Red Cross type cross, if you will, with 4 smaller Greek crosses with 4 equal arms. So you've got this big cross here, and then you've got little crosses in the sections next to them. They can look as different as the designer wants to make them look. Also known as the Crusader cross, the Jerusalem cross dates back to the 11th and 12th centuries when the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, establishing Christians in the area. To get more detailed, there are some historians that believe the large cross represents Christ, while the 4 smaller crosses represent Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Others suggest that a symbol is a visualization of the gospel being spread to the 4 corners of the earth. So there's no, it's not a matter of agreement. There's different opinions on what this could be. but I think they're all good, which is why I wanted to share them with you. Makes it special, plus the fact if I'm going to buy one, I should at least know what it means and can explain it to somebody. So I'm glad we're having the presentation because I had to look it up, which is good. The Jews still follow the ancient Kiddush ritual as pilgrims did hundreds of years ago upon entering Jerusalem for a festival. Isaac set small glasses of wine on top of the wall as we stood around looking at the city below us. I mean, this is monumental. We're up on a high place. We've got this wall that he set all these little cups of wine on. It isn't just there's wine, there's cups. Okay, this is special. It really makes you be there when you go through these kinds of things. Bill, our leader, read from Psalm 122, which is a psalm of David praising his entry into Jerusalem that starts like this. I rejoiced with those who said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem, unquote.
Bill read the entire psalm, which we won't do now, but you can look it up. And it was so special, as Diane said, as we were entering Jerusalem to hear this psalm about how the ancients entered Jerusalem, ancient Jews, during the festival times. And then Isaac recited an ancient Hebrew prayer in Hebrew, and we all drank our wine as we stood on Mount Scopus, overlooking the city. You can see the Dome of the Rock there.
The yellow.
This is the map I was telling you about. You can see the Church of the Redeemer in the middle of that map. And there's the glasses of wine lined up. These are the Jerusalem crosses. That's Diane's. And this one's mine. Let's end our time together today with the English version of the ancient Kiddush prayer. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments and hoped for us, and with love and intent invested us with his sacred Sabbath as memorial to the deed of creation. Amen.
Amen.